Got a question for you today. Do you agree with God? Now, don't be so quick to answer that before you think about it a little bit. Do you and I really always agree with God? Do you like everything God does or doesn't do in your life? Do you always agree when God answers your fervent prayer with a big fat no? When you pray and you ask for blessings, for healings, for situations in your life that you ask God bless them so that they may go well, and instead you get curses, you find out you have diseases, things go bad, do you agree with God that this has happened to you or someone you love and care about? Well, let's think deeply about those issues today as we look at Mark chapter 8, verses 31 through 38. So we're going to be in Mark today, and we've noticed that the Gospel of Mark is not a biography. It's not a history of Jesus. Its purpose appears to be as a witness to Jesus for the Christian community of Mark's day. And Mark points out what it means for Jesus to be the Messiah and what it's required of us in order to follow him as his disciple. Now, we also note that Mark uses the characteristics, examples of the original 12 disciples to instruct his readers about what true Christian discipleship is. So, as we begin reading in chapter 8, verse 31, we're going to recognize that Jesus has begun a new phase in his ministry. So we want to listen for that. This is a new phase in Jesus' ministry. All right, so let's read Mark chapter 8. We're going to read, first of all, verses 31 through 33, then come back and discuss those in detail, and then move on through the chapter a bit. So Mark chapter 8, verse 31 to begin with. He then began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He spoke plainly about this. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, he rebuked Peter. "Get behind me, Satan," he said. "You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." All right, what's going on here? Let's notice this new phase of Jesus' ministry. Many scholars in reading the Gospel of Mark have called it the Messianic secret, that Jesus keeps a secret from everyone that he's the Messiah. And not even his closest disciples really understand fully who Jesus is up until this stark revelation by Peter, who says, "You are the Son of God, the Messiah." And now, as Jesus' trip to Jerusalem to face the crucifixion is about to happen, there's a change in his ministry. There is no more Messianic secret. Notice verse 31. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things. Now, who is the Son of Man? What is the Son of Man? What's that about? Well, you might substitute I, or talking about Jesus, that I must suffer. But instead of just saying I must suffer, Jesus says the Son of Man must suffer. What does the Son of Man mean? Well, Son of Man is Jesus' favorite term for himself in the Gospels. It was a somewhat more neutral term than Messiah. Messiah had some implications of kingship and ruling over the Jews. It might be a threat to the Roman government and to the civil leaders of the Jewish community. So Jesus preferred to call himself the Son of Man. So it's neutral. What does the Son of Man mean? Well, we've explained before, and it's good to note in Hebraic thought what son of means. Son of doesn't always mean the male progeny of someone. Really, the expression son of means having the characteristics of or reflecting the nature of. And the classic, of course, is when James and John kept always mouthing off and calling down fire. And Jesus said, "You are the sons of thunder." What did he mean? He meant you have the characteristics of the sound of being very noisy and disrupting. You irritate people. Sons of thunder, sons of having the characteristic of. How was Jesus the Son of God? Son of God, having the characteristics and the nature of God. So, Son of Man means what? Having the characteristics and nature of a man, human. He said, well, of course. Of course, Jesus is describing himself as human. But it's a very special human when you understand what the Old Testament says, particularly Daniel chapter 7. Because in Daniel chapter 7, the prophet Daniel refers to a son of man as a heavenly figure who is at the throne of God in heaven. Wow. And yet, though he is on the throne of God in heaven with the Ancient of Days, he is called the Son of Man. How could he be the Son of Man and godly at the same time? What's Daniel talking about? All right. So we have this figure in Daniel 7, and the prophet says that the Son of Man will come in the last days, at the end time. And when the Son of Man comes, he will restore his people Israel. He will restore God's people. He will bring God's rule, God's dominion, God's kingdom to the earth. Sounds interesting. And yet, you would have to read Daniel 7 to get that. So when Jesus said, I'm the Son of Man, even his disciples probably thought, whatever you mean by that, I don't know. But that's what he meant. All right. So, the Son of Man. Now, what's interesting, too, is that Mark, in his gospel, connects the imagery of the Son of Man from Daniel 7 to the suffering servant described in Isaiah chapter 52 and 53. And no one had ever connected this powerful heavenly figure with suffering. That didn't seem to make sense. But let's read on. Jesus says clearly right here, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law. Who were they? This was the group that made up what was called the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling leadership in the city of Jerusalem. They were made up of these people, elders or lay members, usually wealthy members of the community. The chief priests were, as it says, the line of priests, their whole family. So one was the chief priest, but also usually his relatives served with him in the Sanhedrin. So the chief priests and the teachers of the law, or the scribes. So these three categories comprise the Sanhedrin, the Jewish ruling body. So he must suffer many things and be rejected. Interestingly, the Greek word there translated as rejected means to fail to pass the test, to fail to pass scrutiny. In other words, the Sanhedrin had looked into this Jesus guy and rejected him and labeled him really a false prophet. So he's rejected. But he says he must. Must. That's an interesting word. In the Greek, it's dei, D-E-I is the way we would transliterate it, must. But you know what it means? It means it is absolutely necessary. It means it's God's will, it's God's plan, and it's God's purpose, and it must. It's absolutely necessary that the Son of Man suffer many things and be rejected. And that he must D-A-D-E-I, he must be killed. Must be. God's plan, God's purpose, and God's will that the Son of Man get killed. It doesn't seem right. He's the heavenly figure who's going to restore the rule and reign of God on earth. And Jesus says he's going to be killed? It's very difficult to understand, to comprehend, and to figure out for the people who are listening to him. So he's going to be killed, but after 3 days, rise again. After 3 days. Now, Mark and Luke say on the third day. And some people get, what, after 3 days, on the third day, what do you mean? Actually, it means exactly the same thing. Semitic idiom for a short period of time. Something that is not permanent. It will pass quickly. So he must be killed, and after 3 days, rise again. Notice verse 32. He spoke plainly about this. Whoa, no more messianic secret. Cat's out of the bag. He spoke plainly. He spoke openly, frankly, bluntly about what was going to happen. Now, you know what that means, don't you? That means by this time in Jesus' life, he knew what was going to happen to him. He knew now exactly what the Father had in mind and his plan, purpose, and will for him. And it was involved suffering, rejection, and death. So he spoke plainly about this for the first time. This is the first time the disciples have heard this put so plainly. Can you imagine their reaction? They're shocked. You know, they liked Jesus. They loved Jesus. They thought he was wonderful. They just were happy to be with him. And the fact that maybe he was the Messiah, the Son of Man, the great rabbi, and whatever else he was, oh, well, that's icing on the cake. We just like this guy. He's closer than a brother to us. And now he says, hey, fellas, I'm about to be killed. What? What? So Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Yeah. God, come over here a minute. Now listen, God, you're all messed up. I hope you know that. You don't know what you're doing. You're wrong. You're mistaken. You're not going to do this. I know you said you got to do it. No, you don't. I'm Peter. I know better than you, God. So, God, wake up. Get your mind right. Come on. Can you imagine how Jesus felt as Peter rebuked him? Same word that means to rebuke a demon. So Peter clearly understood what Jesus said, what Jesus meant, but he wasn't prepared to hear such a thing. And what Peter is saying is, I don't accept that. Or as we might put in the vernacular, that ain't right. So, God, you're wrong to think that. Jesus, you're wrong. I disagree with you, what you say, and what you say that God wants you to do. No, you're wrong. But when Jesus turned and looked at his disciples, now you know what I think this means? He looks around at the others and he goes, you guys are all thinking the same thing, aren't you? Yeah, I can see it in your faces. You all, but Peter mouthed it off, but you're all thinking it. So Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, and he rebuked Peter. Peter rebuked Jesus. Jesus now rebukes Peter. And what does he say to him? Get behind me, Satan. Put yourself in Peter's position. The one you call Lord, Master, Jesus, your rabbi, just called you Satan. And of course, Satan means adversary. You're in opposition. You're opposed. Get behind me, Satan. Now, why did he say, get behind me? Well, if you've ever seen pictures or you're familiar with the rabbis of that age, a rabbi would lead and his disciples would walk behind him. Now, Peter has not walked behind him, we'd say Peter got in his face and rebuked him and told him off. That's not what a disciple does to a rabbi. So Jesus says, get behind me, adversary. You're a disciple. I'm the rabbi. You're the disciple. Get behind me and follow me. I don't follow you, Peter. You don't tell me what to do. You're my disciple. Get behind me. Follow me. Today, I was thinking what he might say to him if we put in modern parlance. Jesus said to Peter, bro, stay in your lane. Go back where you belong. Get in your place. And he said to him, you do not have in mind, and here, mind is the whole direction of your thinking, your way of thoughts about life. You do not have in mind the concerns, the things of God, but merely human concerns. When I said this is what God says must be done, you didn't get it, Peter. You're just thinking about this in human terms, with human concerns. The ways of the world, the way society thinks. Look, we Jewish people know that the Messiah comes to deliver us from the Romans, right? We know that. Messiah doesn't die. He kills people. Come on. He's a ruler and a leader. He doesn't suffer. He doesn't get rejected. He gets accepted and loved by the people. And then he throws the Romans out. We all know that. Jesus, you're stupid. You don't know that, do you? He believed in the popular version of the Messiah of his day. And he's saying to Jesus, it's not right for you to do this. It's not right for the Messiah to die. It's not right, Jesus, for you to think this way. And what Peter's doing is, Peter is virtually saying, I'm opposed to God. I'm opposed to God's will. God, you're wrong. I'm right, you're wrong. I don't agree with you, God. I don't agree with your plan. I don't agree with your purpose. I don't agree with the way you do things because they're stupid. How in the world are you going to bring your kingdom to this earth when the Messiah suffers, is rejected, and dies? That makes no sense whatsoever. I don't accept it. Wow. All right, now we shift gears a little bit. We transition to Jesus has been talking to his disciples, Peter in particular, but all his disciples. Now he's going to shift and he's going to turn to the crowd that's following him. So the previous thing was for Peter and the disciples. This is for everybody. This is for the crowd. This is what he's going to do. And of course, Mark wants his audience, those who are going to read and hear his gospel, to reflect on what Jesus says to the crowds, to everybody. And I'm going to read it again through and then come back and talk about it verse by verse. Then he called the crowd to him along with his disciples. And he said, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me and for the gospel will save it. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world and yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes in his Father's glory with the holy angels. Whoa. Let's look at that more closely now. So Jesus called the crowd to him, along with his disciples. And he said, this is for everyone. Look, whoever wants to be my disciple, that's what the NIV says. The Greek says, if anyone would come after me. if anyone would come after me. It's your option. You're free to respond or not to respond. But if you want to respond, you need to consider some things. Whoever wants to be my disciple must. Got that word again, must. And you must do three things. Three things. Deny themselves, take up their cross, and follow me. This is how to be a disciple of Jesus. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow Jesus. What do you mean deny yourself? Let's deny the self, the self-centeredness. Have you ever experienced yourself really? I mean, unvarnished. You look at your insides, and aren't you really consumed about yourself? Well, you get up in the morning, get out of bed, go look at yourself in the mirror. There I am. Let me fix myself so I look even better than I already do. I want to look good today. I'm going to fix my hair. I'm going to put on my makeup. I'm going to shave. I'm going to get dressed. I'm going to wear my nicest clothes. And you know why? So I look good. So people will look at me and say, he or she looks good. You ever think about almost everything we do is so we look good? It's so much motivated by self. And yet, what is God's way? Love God and love your neighbor as yourself. Well, that's saying a lot because you love yourself a whole bunch. Deny yourself. Love God and love others. Then he says, take up your cross. Literally in the Greek, it's shoulder your stake. What do you mean by shoulder your stake? Well, as most people were familiar in the Roman Empire because they'd seen it, horrible sight of a crucifixion. All around them, thousands sometimes were crucified. That the condemned were often required to take the cross piece, the piece of wood that was nailed to the upright pole, and put it on their shoulder and carry their own cross piece to the cross. And then they'd be nailed or tied to that cross piece, and the cross piece would be nailed or tied to the upright stake. So stauros literally means stake, but by the time, certainly of Jesus and the Gospel of Mark being written, it meant cross. Everybody knew what it was talking about. The stauros was the cross, the implement the Romans used to crucify people. And the embarrassment and humiliation of having to carry your own to the site was just intentionally to humiliate you. So Jesus says, you want to be my disciple? Pick up that stake, pick up it, follow me. Put it on. Carry it on your shoulder. Now you're speaking metaphorically. But what is your sorrows? What is your cross piece? What is your beam? What is your stake that you have to carry? I don't know what it is. Look at what mine are, my family's are, what yours are. But we have to carry it. Whatever it is, we have to carry that burden. We have to carry that stake. Even as Jesus carried his, we must metaphorically carry our own. Take up your stake. Don't let it get you down. Don't surrender. Don't give up. Don't go, oh no, I'm humiliated. Pick it up. Pick it up. Put it on your shoulder and walk forward with it. Say, but it leads to the cross. Yeah. Put it on your shoulder and walk. Follow me, Jesus said. Follow me. Well, we all want to follow Jesus to heaven. But do we want to follow him to the cross? Ouch. He said, follow me. Follow me means follow him to what? Rejection? Suffering? The cross? Follow me, he says, if you want to be my disciple. And he explains in verse 35, Gar, for whoever wants to save their life, whoever wants to save their life, whoever loves themselves so much that they're not willing to deny themselves, take up their cross and follow me, because it's just not convenient, it's not comfortable. Whoever wants to save their life will lose it. You talk about irony. You want to seek to save your life and preserve the self? That's the surest way to lose it. Now, what's he talking about here? The NIV says, save their life. All right, we're going to have some fun with Greek words again. The word that's translated life is suke. Now, in Greek, you say suke. In English, we tend to say what? Psyche. Suke, psyche, I like to say suke, okay? But that's the word. That's the word that's used here that the NIV translates how? Life. Save your life. Save your suke. Okay, what does suke mean? You got a few hours? It's one of those complex words that we have them in English, but this is a complex word in Greek because it has some literal meanings, but it has some figurative meanings. It has some contextual meanings. It has some meanings from Greek philosophy. It's a difficult word to define. All you can do is look at it in a specific context and try to figure out what definition fits that context best. So what does psyche mean? Literally, it means breath, life. Life is probably, as we have here, one of the commonest translations of it into English, life. It's also translated often as soul. Particularly if you read some of the old English translations, they will translate suke as soul. What does it mean? Life force, your life force, the life principle, the inner life of humans, the seat and center of life, the person and the personality, the mind, you might say. That, hear me this, that which when added to the body, the soma, that which when added to the body is what makes you you. It's what makes your true self. Suke. Now, the problem is when it's translated as soul, people think of the Greek philosophical idea of the immortal soul. And by the immortal soul, what they mean is the wonderful, divinely oriented soul is trapped in this dirty, nasty, ugly human body. And all you can hope is that someday you'll kick that nasty body aside and your glorious soul will be free at last to live in its pure and wonderful state. That's wrong. That's not what the Bible teaches. There's no dualism. Body here, soul there. Scripturally, you are body and suke, soma and suke. That's you. You take your personality, your being, your life force, and remove it from your body. You're not fully you anymore. That's why there's a resurrection from the dead. That's why there's a bodily resurrection. Because when your suke is in the hands of God, you're not, to use the expression, you're not all there. You're not fully you. Our bodies are very much a part of who we are. God created the body out of the dust of the ground, Genesis says. And he said, behold, it is very good. And he breathed into his nostrils the breath of nephesh, suke. and it became a living suke. That's who we are. Body, soma, and suke is us. That's the reality. So, but whoever wants to save their life, their personality, their life force, who they are, if you just seek, you know what you do when you do that? You make yourself an idol. You actually worship yourself, put yourself above God and everyone else. That's what he means when you want to save. You want to rescue. You want to preserve your life at all costs. And yet Jesus was willing to what? Give away his life for others. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. You know, what do you mean by lose it? Does that mean, where'd it go? I can't find it anymore. I lost. No. What does it mean by lose it? In the Greek could be translated, throw it away. Ruin it. I like those translations. If you seek to save your life, you know what you're going to do? You're going to ruin it. You're going to mess it up. You're going to destroy it. You're going to throw your life away. If all you care about is yourself, you're ruining your life. But whoever loses it, and here I'd like to translate that, gives it away, not throw it away, but now give it away. But whoever loses their suke for me and for the gospel, that is for doing the ministry, for the mission. Example of that, the Apostle Paul lost his life. Why? For preaching the gospel. Paul lost his suke, but he gained his suke. I know that's irony, a paradox, but it's true. So whoever loses their life for me and the gospel will save it. Well, that's the way you really rescue it. That's the way you preserve it. Verse 36, Gar, for what good? And here he uses a financial term. For what profit? For what benefit is it for someone to gain, to acquire, to win, to earn the whole world? How do you gain the whole world? Well, you can talk about riches, you can talk about wealth, you can talk about power, you can talk about the world's approval. I want the world to think well of me by the world's standards, and you'll do anything it takes to be thought of by others or by the world or by society as a good person. Today they have an expression, it's called virtue signaling. You want everybody to think you're wonderful, virtuous, and right. They'll gain the whole world. What if you gain the whole world and yet forfeit your soul? Forfeit, suffer damage to, loss to, just ruin it, alienate it from God. Forfeit your suke, your sac. How do you forfeit it? Let's say you just ruin it. You break your relationship with God, and your suke is not worth a dime. You may still have it, but it's ruined. It's damaged. It's not what it should be. Verse 37. Or what can, actually, price, talking about price here, he's using a monetary thing. What can anyone give? How much money? What can anyone give in exchange to purchase their soul, their suke? You know, to be a Christian, you're willing to give up your suke for others and for God. You're willing to be rejected. You're willing to suffer. You're willing to die. You give up that suke. And again, let me repeat the irony. What happens when you give up your suke? You gain it. Isn't that ironic? Isn't that amazing? That's God's irony. Then Jesus concludes in verse 38, Gar, for if anyone is ashamed of me, ashamed of me. Why would anyone be ashamed of Jesus? Well, he died on a cross. Cursed is everyone who hangs on a tree. How could he be the Messiah? He's cursed by the book of Deuteronomy. He can't be the Messiah. We've checked him out. He hung on a tree. He was cursed. I'm ashamed of him. So that you don't want a relationship. I'm ashamed of you. I'm embarrassed by you. I don't want you around. I don't want you in a relationship with me. Anyone who's ashamed of me. Now, the irony is, in the final judgment, who's going to be the judge? Jesus. You think it's really a good idea to be ashamed of the judge? I think you ought to think that one over a little bit. If anyone is ashamed of me and my words, what I taught, what I've said, the gospel message, are people ashamed of it? Yes. Sadly. People call it out of date. People call it not modern thinking. Jesus was just not with it. Oh, he was good for his day, but his words don't apply today. He's just not with it. He's not modern. He's not woke. Oh, Jesus wasn't woke. Jesus was phobic. His words are phobic. He was just superstitious. We don't go in for all that mystic, superstitious life after death. We're scientists today. We know better. All the things the world can say. Why? Because they're ashamed of Jesus. He just doesn't do what they think he should have done. Sounds a lot like Peter, doesn't it? Jesus is just not who they think he ought to be. So they try to reform him in their own image, according to the world's standards. But what does Jesus say? If anyone is ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous, what do you mean adulterous? Well, adultery is when you belong to someone and you choose or give yourself to someone else. We belong to God. When we give ourselves to the devil or to this world or to our own selves, we've committed adultery. And as the Old Testament describes it, it's a form of idolatry. Adultery, idolatry, virtually synonymous. In this adulterous and sinful, depraved generation, age, the Son of Man will be ashamed of them when he comes. Oh, you notice how Jesus shifted now in his usage of Son of Man? Before it was the human, suffering, rejected Son of Man, just a human. Now he's the Daniel 7 Son of Man who's coming in glory with dominion, rulership, authority over the world. When the Son of Man comes, he will be ashamed of them. Ashamed of them. Embarrassed. He feels bad. Sorrowful. I'm sorry you don't want a relationship. I'm ashamed. I feel so bad that you don't want to have a relationship with me. Awful. He will be ashamed of them when he comes in the Father's glory, doxa, splendor, majesty, with the holy angels. Describes when he's coming again. So you have here a dichotomy, cross, shame versus glory. And this was a message that Mark had for the persecuted Christians to whom he wrote the story. Of you think you're being persecuted? You think you're being rejected for being a Christian? Welcome to being a disciple. That's what it entails. So what do we learn from what Mark has written here? We learn that God has a will. He has a plan and a purpose for all humans and all creation. Listen, God knows what he's doing. But sometimes we don't agree with the way God's doing it. We become like Satan, the adversary. And we're opposed to how God has chosen to do or not to do things. You know, we pray, but God and Jesus are still not doing what we want. What's up with that? I prayed about it, God. Why aren't you doing what I said? Why this disease? Why this tragedy? Why this death? It ain't right, God. We don't agree with you. Come on, God. Jesus did miracles. You're all powerful. God, you're just not doing what you should do. Here's the thing. Jesus does not conform to who or what we think he should be. We must conform to who he is. You know, the thing about humans is we want to make God in our image. That's not how it works. Not how it works. We must conform to Jesus. Jesus is the perfect human in the image of God and in perfect relationship with the Father through the Spirit. Now, Adam was created in the image of God, wasn't he? But Adam disobeyed, and he ruined, like that word again, ruined that incredible relationship we had with God. Threw it away. Adam damaged and then ruined his suke, the human existence that God had given him. And all of Adam's progeny have been damaged and ruined as well. Our sukes are damaged, ruined. We live in a fallen world with fallen human nature. That's why there's suffering. That's why there's sin. That's why there's evil. That's why there's disease. That's why there's death. It's our fault. You say, well, Adam's fault. Eve's fault. Yeah, I joined right in. But God has a plan for ultimately saving us from suffering, from sin, and from evil. God's plan for rescuing humanity, 2 words. God's plan for rescuing humanity, Jesus Christ. Those who respond to God's love in Jesus through the Holy Spirit repent of their sins. They deny themselves. They take up their cross, whatever suffering they may encounter for being a Christian. And they follow Jesus as his disciple. And following Jesus means not only following him into glory, but it means following him to the cross. The world did not treat Jesus kindly. It will not treat his followers kindly either. But we must have faith. We must trust God. We must have patience that his plan is best and that his purpose will be accomplished and that God knows what he's doing. And how many times do we have people look at, how can there be a God? Look at this world. Look at what's going on in this world. There can't be a God. That's saying, God, you got it all wrong. You messed up. You didn't know what you were doing. I don't agree with what you've done. Sorry. You've got to trust God. You've got to have faith. You've got to believe. You've got to hope. It's all going to work out. Whatever suffering we have to endure is temporary for the glory that is to be forever. Jesus spent 3 days dead. Awful. Horrible. But it was 3 days. And then he lived again. You get it? Short period. After 3 days, on the 3rd day, a short period, suffering. Then the resurrection to eternity. But we don't want those 3 days. We want to bypass the 3 days. We want to go directly to glory. Not how it works. Those who respond to God's love through Jesus and the Holy Spirit, you know what you do? You saved your suke. You save your suke when you do that. The true humanity as God intended humanity to be. Through Jesus Christ and by the Holy Spirit, God restores our relationship with Him the way that He intended for it to be from the creation. In union with Christ, the image of God is restored in us. The relationship with God that God intends for humans to have with Him is restored. Suke is healed. God, through Jesus Christ and by the Spirit, rescues and restores our suke, the full human life and existence God intended humans from the beginning. And what I think a lot of us as Christians sometimes fail to realize is that we're going to be human forever. Glorified. Glorified. Spiritual body, but human. A lot of people don't understand that Jesus is still human. Jesus, Son of God, is incarnated forever. He's still human. Fully human and fully God. We will be fully human with God forever, glorified. That's what God intends. So we can be certain and trust God that as His disciples, fully devoted followers of Jesus, when Jesus Christ, the Son of Man, comes in glory, and we rise up to meet Him, to be with Him forever, what is Jesus going to say to you and me? I don't think He's going to say, I'm so ashamed of you. I really don't think so. I think what Jesus is going to say is, well done. Well done, my good and faithful disciple. Enter into the joy of the Lord. That's what He's going to say. So may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, the communion of the Holy Spirit be with us all. Amen.
Amen. Amen.